Hi, Jude.
Emma.
For those that don't know, what is WOW?
WOW is a place to celebrate everything that girls, women, non-binary people have done in history, are doing now, and a place to urge activism about what we will all do in the future. Mostly it's festivals that bring together people of all ages, all backgrounds, fully intersectional, fully intergenerational, but it's also think-ins and pop-up events and buses around the country and festivals around the world. It's in every continent now.
Wow.
And it's a network and a kind of connective tissue for everybody who thinks, do you know what, the world could definitely be better if we had gender equality.
You have had an incredible career and a fascinating life. Could you tell us a little bit more about your backstory and why you started WOW in the first place?
So I'm one of 4 daughters, but maybe more important than that, my father's one of 14 children.
Wow.
And he had 8 sisters. And he noticed that his 8 sisters didn't really get the same opportunities as the brothers. And it mattered to him a lot. So when he happened to have 4 daughters, he and my mum were like very keen to make us go, you know, you can do anything you want. Mm. Not that the world would necessarily welcome or let you, but as far as we're concerned, go. And that influenced, I suppose, my sense that I was legitimized, because your dad has to legitimize you as a girl, because he is the patriarchy. So it was very significant that as a starting point. And being brought up in Liverpool, which is a very mixed space. You know, we are Irish background. We were the third in, as they say, in the immigrant community. So the Chinese were first, the West African settlers the second, and the Irish the third. Mm-hmm. So we were encouraged to go, like, respect your elders, as in the other people who came before. So I was always very aware that actually the world needed to be mixed. Mm-hmm. And given respect for its mixtures. But, you know, being a white woman, you start noticing gates that open for you that don't open for your friends. And that struck a chord in me also very early. So I think, you know, like most women, having big dreams as a little girl from Liverpool was something that brought a lot of scoffing from people, a kind of, you know, sometimes out of love, like don't hurt yourself by trying to vault over a fence you'll never be able to reach.
Absolutely.
And sometimes just, you know, derision by people who are hostile or mean. And I had quite a lot of that throughout my whole career. But I think because of this idea of being legitimized early, it never put me off. But it did make me notice that, you know, having to work so much harder, having to audition all the time for what you do, having to sort of say to yourself and others, I mustn't listen to this story, that we are essentially assistants or backers up, or, you know, in the background. That battle to allow yourself to be centre stage and ignoring the voices that go, gosh, you're a bit ambitious, a bit pushy. You know, that's a constant battle through your whole life. But, you know, I've had a lot of my dreams come true about myself as a creative woman, as a director of theatre and music, and as a producer and commissioner of other people's work.
What a wonderful thing to be able to say.
I have my dreams come true. Yeah. I mean, and that's really driven my sense that how cruel it is when people have dreams and they're squashed. Or when people are just told, well, don't have dreams, you know, because who are you to have dreams? And it's not needed. You know, this is the rights that I fight for girls and women are the rights that I want for everybody. You know, I love men. I've got a son and I've got a grandson, and I love my dad and my partner, and I don't want this idea of the evolving of rights to be something which is like we want to put other people's rights to the test. Yes. That's not what we want, is it? So I suppose an awful lot of what I'm driven by is this sense that, you know, I do love humans. And I want humans not to be hurt or marginalised. And the right for women and girls to feel equal is so systemically confusing for the world. And if we can solve that, we are solving, as we do that, rights of all minorities, because women represent all minorities.
Yes.
So that's the big dream. And since I've had many other dreams come to pass, let's not stop here.
I love that so much. I also love what you're saying about your father legitimizing you, and that having this profound impact on you, but then that in turn allowing you to create spaces where other people who might not have had that legitimization in the home can themselves find legitimization. I feel like that's so important, and also just like very hard relate to being from a part of the world. To just being from Dublin and being from the particular area in Dublin that I'm from, and as a result of that, it not seeming possible or plausible that I could, achieve what I have today.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because you must have had a spark that went, I'm not going to be pushed back down. I'm not going to be marginalized. I'm not going to be put to the one side. Who knows where these sparks come from?
Yeah.
But what I have noticed in WOW is that even somebody who has lived perhaps a much narrower life where they've confined themselves, or they've confined their dreams, when they suddenly look around and see lots of other people who've stepped forward and are happy, doesn't mean that they haven't got traumas or difficulties.
Oh, yeah.
But, they know it's the right thing to have done. Mm-hmm. It gives them so much inspiration.
Yes.
So it's never too late to suddenly ignite a spark in someone.
WOW is turning 15 this year.
I know. That is actually quite mind-boggling for me,
I'm sure.
Because when I started WOW, it was once. I was going to do one festival.
Oh, really? You didn't see it kind of continuing?
Well, no, I wasn't a sort of the kind of megalomaniac that would, I'll start a world movement. Why not?
Casually.
No, it was the 100th anniversary of International Women's Day in the UK. I was running the South Bank Centre, which is one of the largest arts centres in Europe, which, again, from a little girl in Liverpool with not Uxbridge background, coming from a very ordinary place, it was very unusual to have got that far. And that was an example of social mobility, not just my verve, but people wanting to give opportunities all the way along the line. And I suddenly realised I was surrounded by girls, particularly, and young women who were saying to me, we don't really need to do anything more on feminism. It's kind of done now, isn't it? 15 years ago, we hadn't got the Me Too movement. Obviously, we didn't have everyday sexism. We hadn't had Malala. We hadn't had the Delhi rape. We hadn't had many, many of the things which have articulated why it's so necessary to fight for girls' and women's and non-binary rights. And then people were laissez-faire. They were complacent. Mm-hmm. And I thought, right, we must celebrate this 100th anniversary because, look at whose shoulders we're standing on.
Yes.
And I did this massive festival in the South Bank Centre. 5,000 people came. And I just thought, gosh, this is needed, isn't it? And immediately, a friend of mine from America said, can we do this in Baltimore? And another person said, can we do this in Turkey? And then it just sort of started happening. If we can make it something which belongs to each place, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, whatever, but has the same kind of kit of parts and the same tone of voice, warm, loving, vivacious, fun, brave, truthful, then it should belong everywhere. And so it became a global phenomenon, but it wasn't what I planned.
WOW has now taken place in 71 locations across 6 continents. How did WOW start happening in more countries, and what's it like to have been able to bear witness to these conversations about gender equality happening across so many different cultural contexts?
Yeah, it's been amazing to see this global phenomena. Particular people go, I'd like a WOW. Then we work with them and help them do it. But it's a very, very local thing. And you have these very extraordinary differences. So, for example, WOW in Rio, in Brazil, 94,000 people came to the first WOW over 3 days in the very center of Rio, down in the port area, but organized by the women from one of the largest favelas. So, women who are perceived in Brazil to be sort of powerless and with no agency, they actually gathered together the resources and made this amazing, perhaps one of our largest festivals, happen. And they are now doing it on a regular basis. And they wanted to demonstrate with WOW, not only, what the conversations they wanted to have with each other, but the fact that women from the favelas were articulate and clear about what needed to change for them and for everybody else, and that they could represent the Brazil. You know, they didn't just have to sort of be ghettoized, as it were. And then another group of women who were the First Nations women in Australia, in a place called Catherine, which is tiny, came and said, we want to do a WOW because we don't have any real conversations with the white settler women who live in our own community, and yet we share some of the same issues. You know, we're sharing issues to do with domestic violence, we're sharing issues to do with healthcare, we're sharing issues to do with loneliness, you know, aging, all of those sorts of things. And when you go to these different WOWs, as I do, and I speak at them, and you know, we think together about what curating could look like, you're struck by, I suppose, how similar everybody is, whether they're from a deeply rural community or from a phenomenal mega city like Karachi. We all have the same issues. The really binding, sad one is violence. You know, you can't go anywhere in the world that hasn't got an epidemic of violence, both at a domestic level and at a societal level, and that's really difficult. But the good news is people talk about it a lot more than they ever did. And the other thing that you share is women's yearning to enter the economic market under their own terms. You know, not just to do 3 jobs to kind of keep the family going, but to have something which is their ideas made real financially. But there's so many other things as well, you know, but positive and negative that we all share. And of course, WOW is a cultural space. So every single person who comes to us, whether they're in Kenya or Turkey, they know that part of what WOW will be a place for dance, a place for music, a place for poetry, a place for sort of fun.
Fun is so crucial.
Fun is so crucial. And it means that they suddenly realize that they have a way of reaching ordinary people, who would never come to a conference or a symposium.
Yeah.
But a festival? Why not? A festival where you can eat and have drink and wander around and see some weird, amazing martial arts groups that you never normally see women do, and that's very exciting. And when I go to, say, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, the Southeast Asian countries where we work with the British Council in particular, so many men.
Fascinating.
Many men.
Yeah.
Not the same in the West, actually. And I think that's because probably, all of those brothers, uncles, dads, they want the world to change as well. And they can see the extreme difference sometimes in status. And they know it's not fair. And they don't feel embarrassed about bringing their shoulder to the wheel. I wish we had a bit more of that.
Yeah, that's incredible that there's so many men. That would be fantastic. If men were better represented at events that centered women in this part of the world.
But I do also think that we have to recognize that in the journey that we've been on to understand ourselves, why did we reach this position? And what are the things that trap us? And how can we make those changes happen? And we've needed to have those conversations, and we've become very articulate. I think we have to recognize the fact that boys and men feel like it was sort of not their business.
Yeah.
And, we can criticize that in them, but we can also maybe say to ourselves, perhaps we didn't do quite the right invitation. Because now,
completely,
I think you've got a son.
I have 2 sons.
2 sons,
yeah.
okay. So I've got a son, I've got a grandson. I know that they feel, uncertain is one possibility, hostile might be another.
Absolutely, it's
around
divisive rhetoric.
Yeah, exactly. And we have to change that. And people have often said to me, well, it's not our job to change it. Men can do that work for themselves. Maybe, but, I started WOW because women weren't doing that work for ourselves.
Yes.
And I don't think it's that easy for boys and men to quite know where to begin with the conversation, since they've assumed that it was
they're
just
excluded from it.
Or assumed it was just about women catching up.
Yeah.
But when they realise, actually, no, it's not about catching up, it's about recalibrating the whole world. That means men suddenly experience the need for change, and that's frightening for us all.
Yeah. Do you think WOW is as needed as it was in 2010, or even more so?
It was needed in 2010 because the West, or global South, had sort of allowed itself to be not only complacent but arrogant in thinking, well, women here are not as bad as women there, and, you know, like we don't need to do much. That was amazingly arrogant and ignorant because we weren't understanding that we are completely looped in altogether when you have patriarchy. Everything is dependent on that philosophy in terms of how we all stand in relationship to each other. And we weren't being truthful about, you know, the many, many things that we weren't allowed to talk about or didn't choose to talk about. And now we are truthful, much, much more so. So you could think now, well, great, you know, we've kind of done it now, haven't we? But look at what's happening. The more women have said, look, you know, we're entitled to rights and we want them to look like this, the more some men have said, hold on a second, this is just getting out of hand. So the survey that was done recently across the world said that, you know, many, many men felt that feminism had gone far enough or too far. And the alarming fact was there were more young men saying that than older men. And so, you know, it sounds like a cliche to say Andrew Tate, you know, etc. But there's a real issue now about an idea, along with woke, that the world has been pushed out of its natural order by women and minority voices demanding change, and that there's a group of people who want to push it back into its proper order. They're not all men by any means. There's plenty of women saying that too. And I think that WOW has to carry on saying with compassion and determination and as much humour as we can muster, you know, you're going down the wrong path, everybody. That is not the way to a more satisfying, richer, more positive world for everyone, including the people who think it's the best path.
And I think your centralizing of beauty and joy as guiding principles within the overall vision is testimony to the type of like transformation like that you're, you know, trying to cultivate in the world. Truly something everybody would benefit
Absolutely.
from.
I do think that, you know, none of us can operate on the world stage all the time. And when we come back just to ourselves, the way that we nourish ourselves back to activism, if we want to be in an active space like that, is by, you know, taking care of ourselves and finding ourselves to be fun and interesting and doing good things. You know, it's a complicated thing, change, and it's a very difficult thing to be in activist mode. I think people find it incredibly tiring. And I always say to people as well that, you know, start with yourself and start with your own family, your own friends. You don't have to, not everybody has to be sort of marching forward, leading the band, do they? But if human rights feels like a drudgery, then people will bow out. Human rights has got to feel like evidence of fun. It was a really significant moment where it is in WOW in Pakistan, where a woman who was the world champion, the first world champion surfer in India, said that her parents didn't approve of her surfing. And we all kind of went, oh, you know, that's awful. Didn't they like you surfing? She said, no, it wasn't that we didn't mind me surfing. They didn't want my skin to get darker with the sun, because they thought I would be then perceived as a lower caste person. And that made me sit up again and think, you know, it's not as simple as, you know, get equality as a woman. It's get equality intersectionally with a lot of other issues that are about, you know, race and sexuality and all of these other things. So that's always a kind of amazing thing, that people's stories are not usually one thing, there's several things at the same time.
It's always so, I genuinely mean this, it's always so incredibly inspiring speaking to you, Jude. So thank you so much. Thank you.